언제나 함께 있었음 해 모든 게 다 통하니까 Feels like daydreaming 너와 있을 땐 난 I love my life 사라지지.
You are watching BBC News and we'll bring you continuing coverage of this breaking news story that the British man accused of the Southport attack in which 3 young girls were stabbed to death has changed his plea on the first day of his trial, pleading guilty to all charges. Axel Rudakabana, who is 18, pleaded guilty at Liverpool Crown Court to murdering 3 young girls. He also pleaded guilty to the attempted murder of 8 other children and to the attempted murder of Leanne Lucas and Jonathan Hayes. While Alice da Silva Aguirre, who was 9 years old, Bebe King, who was 6 years old, and 7-year-old Elsie Stankham were stabbed to death at that Taylor Swift-themed dance class on the 29th of July in 2024.
13-year-old Axel alleges he was bullied and was being racially singled out by fellow pupils who claimed he'd started acting up in class, arguing with teachers, and often storming out of the room. A lot of teenagers do this, right? To get upset. It's nothing new. But then he made an anonymous phone call to Childline stating that he was having homicidal thoughts and admitted that he had taken a steak knife to class on more than 100 occasions. And he actually asked the person on the phone, what should he do if he kills someone? And with that, the alarms went off. Of course, lawyers claim that the call was just a scream into the dark for help. But those type of telephone calls trigger a chain of events that always lead to something like this. And it cultivated nearly 5 years later in one of the most shocking atrocities in England's history. Within days of that telephone call, Alex was permanently expelled from school and all mainstream education, further education. But his infatuation with violence was growing like a red-hot pit in his stomach until on the 17th of October in 2019, he was asked why he'd taken a knife to school, and he replied, quote, to use it.
Summer in Southport at the start of the school holidays. It should have been the happiest of places. Instead, horror visited this town. At a holiday club, children had been dancing when music and laughter turned to screams and then silence. 6-year-old BB King, Elsie Stankham, aged 7, and Alice Aguirre, who was 9, were all murdered. 8 other children lay wounded, and 2 adults were also attacked, including Leanne Lucas, who'd been teaching the group. They were stabbed by a teenager, barely out of childhood himself. This is Axel Rudakabana dressed as Doctor Who in a 2018 Children in Need promotion. The charity says it has no affiliation with him. Now 18, Rudakabana has pleaded guilty to the murders, attempted murders and other related charges. The teenager's issues with violence started when he was young. He was expelled from this school at the age of 13 and on one occasion was seen swinging a hockey stick around, breaking another child's wrist and having to be restrained by a teacher. A picture's starting to emerge of issues within Axel Rudakabana's past. Neighbours have told us that the police visited the family home here on several occasions in the couple of months leading up to the attack. On the day of the murders, a doorbell camera captured him pacing up and down outside his house before catching a taxi to the scene. His hood is up and he's wearing a face mask. When police later raided the house, they found a suspicious substance which was tested and found to be the poison ricin. It wasn't used in the stabbing. Rudakabana had also downloaded a study of the Al-Qaeda training manual, which is an offence under the Terrorism Act. But the Southport attack has not been declared a terrorist incident. Both discoveries led to extra charges, which were announced by Merseyside's Chief Constable.
I recognise that these new charges may lead to speculation, matter for which Axel Rudakabana has been charged under the Terrorism Act does not require motive to be established. For a matter to be declared as a terrorist incident, motivation would need to be established. I would strongly advise anyone against speculating as to the motivation in this case.
Now, Alex lived with his parents and his older brother in the quiet Lancashire village of Banks. Just prior to Christmas, he went to school armed with a knife and a hockey stick and attacked a student. He broke the boy's wrist and had to be physically restrained by school staff. I'm sorry, I said knife and, what did I say? I said knife and stick. It was a hockey stick, not a knife. I'm sorry about that. But police later found that knife in his backpack and arrested him on suspicion of assault and carrying a knife. It made me think, suspicion of assault? Wow, that's kind of stretching the law a little bit. But again, this is over, across the pond, so. He later pled guilty. He had to register as a felony. He had to register as a felon, and that he had a felony conviction now at the age of 13.
Riots broke out across England in the days following the attack after online disinformation suggesting that the culprit was an illegal immigrant. In fact, Rudakabana was born in Cardiff. The police say they don't know why he went on his stabbing spree. He'll be sentenced at a later point. Judith Moritz, BBC News.
So just to remind you that we have breaking news, and we're going to be continuing to follow this breaking news that the British man who was accused of the Southport attack in which 3 young girls were stabbed to death has changed his plea on the first day of his trial. Alex Rudakabana, who is now 18 years old, has pleaded guilty to all charges. Well, Nick Garnett is at Liverpool Crown Court, and we can cross over there live. Nick, so just bring us up to date in terms of this breaking news that has is just coming into us now within the past few minutes.
This has taken everyone by surprise. Everyone was expecting a full trial lasting for probably 2 or 3 weeks to take place. This was the first day of that trial and was due to only be held up to involve itself in the selection of a jury. But before that could take place, the charges needed to be read out to Axel Rudakabana. There was a delay of about 1 hour in court. It was due to start at about 10:30. At 11:30, we were allowed into court and into a special annex that has been set up because so many journalists wanted to be here today. When that started, it became very clear, very quickly that Rudakabana was changing his pleas. As the charges were read out to him, the clerk of the court said, "And you are changing your plea to guilty." And this was accepted by him. Now, right the way throughout this, Rudakabana has refused to speak in court, but he intimated that that was the case. And that was what happened with every single charge. So let's go through those charges because it's important. He was charged and convicted of the murder of B.B. King, who was 6 years old. Elsie Stankham, who was 7 years old, and Alice da Silva Aguiar, who was 9 years old. Now, on top of murdering those 3 children at a dance class in Southport just as the summer holidays were getting underway in England, 8 more children who were at the dance class were also injured. 5 of them were critically injured. He was charged with the attempted murder of all of them, as well as 2 adults, one of the people who was taking the class and a passerby who came to try and help. And he was convicted of the attempted murder of them. He was charged with possessing a bladed knife, a curved kitchen knife. And he was also found guilty, by admitting it, of production of a toxic agent, namely ricin. And this is a complicated charge, so I'm going to read it out from my notes. Possession of information of a kind likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism, namely a PDF computer file entitled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants, the Al-Qaeda Training Manual.
He soon enrolled in a rehabilitative program, which he completed in 2021. During an IT class, Alex made more alarming statements regarding mass shooting. What had happened was a teacher looked over his shoulder at a computer screen Alex was working at and saw a webpage about a bloodbath at a U.S. high school and therefore reported it. He was interviewed by counterterrorism officers, but it was not escalated as a concern. simply because he had no firm ideology.
Now, that was found on a computer, and he was charged with that offence in October and pleaded guilty today. Now, as the trial, as it got underway, it became clear as the charges started to change that he was pleading guilty to all of these. Now, afterwards, he went and sat down in the dock. In fact, he never stood up in the dock, I don't think. And Mr. Justice Goose, who was the trial judge, said, "Axel Ruder-Cabana, you can hear me, I know. And those who sit with me say you have nodded your head to indicate that you can hear what I'm saying. You have now pleaded guilty to this indictment, to each of the charges upon it. You will be sentenced on Thursday. You will understand that it's inevitable. That sentence I impose on you will mean a life sentence equivalent. In the meantime, you will go with the officers and you will be produced at that hearing. Take him down." At that point, the judge carried on, and this was a really important thing and shows you just how much of a surprise this was. The judge said, "I'm conscious that the families aren't here today because they'd assumed the case would open tomorrow morning and the trial would begin then. We'd all assumed that," he said. "They were not here to hear him enter his pleas. Our apologies to them." So that's the court apologising to the families of the children who were murdered and those who he tried to attack and kill as well. As he said that they weren't here at this because we thought that today was simply going to be a day when the jury was sworn in, when legal argument and discussion about the case would take place. But instead, Axel Ruder-Cabana came into court, 18 years old, a man from Banks in Lancashire, and pleaded guilty to all the charges put to him.
Nick, obviously a very distressing case, and it had repercussions across the country. But just in terms of what happened in court, he refused to stand and speak his name and then answered very quietly and muffled guilty to each of those counts that you outline. Just back in December, he pleaded not guilty. Pleas were entered on his behalf for the charges of murder and attempted murder, a most distressing case.
This is a child. He was under the care of a children's mental health hospital, which found that anxiety was preventing the boy from leaving his house. Of course, idle hands, we all know, right? So what did he do? He started looking on the internet and reading Al-Qaeda training books, which he later used to make his deadly ricin poison in his bedroom. He even shared the posts on places like Instagram about Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Remember him? And just 2 months later after that, he was on the radar again of law enforcement, researching the 2017 London Bridge attack. Again, agents did not visit him in person, and there was no further action. He also got on a bus with a knife and threatened the driver to let him ride for free. And he stated he wanted to stab somebody. So the bus driver alerted police. Instead of arresting him, they took him home and told his mother, specifically asking that she keep knives out of his reach.
I mean, he has shown throughout the whole legal process disdain for everything involved. He refused to stand. He refused to take part. At one hearing that I saw him at, he rocked gently from side to side, but still would not speak to the court. Now, that is his right to do that. There have been cases in the past, haven't there, where people have actually refused to turn up in court. But today, this was where he could not hide anymore. He had to be there in court, and he was brought into the court, refused to speak, and as you say, mumbled those changes of plea, which were then relayed by the court itself, by the clerk of the court, to the judge, that he was changing his plea on each and every count and was convicted of those. I have to say, you know, the level of surprise at this. On Friday, Merseyside Police, which is the police authority that's been dealing with this, held a briefing for journalists. It went on for more than 2 hours. There was full discussion, and at that point, no idea whatsoever that this was going to happen, that he was going to change his pleas. But after an hour of legal argument and legal discussion this morning between his defence team and the judge, this is what's happened in court today. Now, where this leaves the families, as I say, the families were not here in court. They weren't here to hear what was happening and in some way to be part of the process. And that has taken them by surprise. The judge, Mr. Justice Goose, has accepted that and apologised to them that that was the case. He didn't know what was going to happen either. But in some ways that, you know, it adds to the pain of this, that this is just so much agony for the families. Southport is a small town. It sits on the northwest coast of England, and it's a very, very tranquil place. I'd say that mildly. It's very, very quiet, and so everybody knows people there. In the middle of the town, in one of the theatres and the civic centre in the town, there is a book of remembrance, and it is so full of people who've just travelled to the town since last summer and put their names in. There are flowers left outside still every day. There are flowers being left there. This is a town that's still hurting, that is still grieving. And now these changes of plea, well, it means that they won't have to go through the pain of hearing exactly what happened on that day. But it also means that Rudy Cabana, in some ways, gets away with having to confront what he did and the horrors of what he did last summer.
And look, by 2023, he had stopped interacting with all public servants, especially the mental health people who were assigned to him. He hadn't been to school in almost a year and spent hundreds of hours at home on his tablet reading suspected terrorist manuals. But he never hid his dark obsessions, right? People were clearly worried about it, but either he was never taken seriously, or better yet, no one knew quite what to do with him. So by the summer of 2024, nearly 5 years after that call to Childline asking what he should do if he killed someone, he was now 18 and got sentenced just this Thursday to a minimum of 52 years, the longest for anyone his age. And be aware, there will be an appeal. But when you have bodies like this, very rare you will ever see a Big Mac ever again. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm RJ Smith. Really appreciate you being here. Hit the like button, please. Just do it. I need you to help me out. And also subscribe, turn on notifications so you're notified every time a new awesome video comes out from us here. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.